Today, the color guard from Grissom Air Reserve Base will retire the colors that are now flying and raise a new flag in its place. Under God had not been added to the Pledge of Allegiance. Under God was added in 1954. Today we salute the 50-star flag, and we are proud to do so under God. We will be led in the pledge by representatives of Girl Scout Troop 411 from Northern Indiana and Michigan. Girls, can you step forward, please? To arrive. Only through the dedication of historians and volunteers at places like the Miami County Museum and organizations like the World War I Centennial Committee are we made aware of those difficult times and the people who would otherwise have faded into history anonymously. Their efforts and sacrifices have been unheralded, but are now finally being recognized. It is, of course, quite appropriate that this celebration take place on Mother's Day weekend. I'd like to recognize the people who made this day possible. It started with the National World War I Centennial Committee, moved to the Indiana World War I Centennial Committee, to the Miami County Worth Remembering Committee, to the people who did the work on this memorial and put this ceremony together.
Improvement thing, I guess. And our sheriff and our clerk. Our assessor, auditor.
Put your hands just like this. Keep your arms straight. Put your helmet.
Well, thanks, Jay. I appreciate it.
Bring your hand up and you'll touch right there. Make sure you tilt your hand down.
One of the outcomes of World War I that's still with us today are the poppies, which you see a lot of the veterans organizations pass out each fall. And the way the poppy came into being and represents World War I, and then since then all veterans, is that first of all, the poppy in France, the seed may lay dormant for a long period of time, but when the ground is worked up, it'll start growing. Well, the no man's land area between the two trench areas was probably most times 200 or 300 yards, or maybe a little more, and the artillery would just churn the ground up, and when it would rain, all these poppies would come up and grow. So you would have big, huge fields of poppies down through no man's land. And in late April of 1915, in the Second Battle of the Pries, a Canadian unit, the 1st Artillery Brigade, took some casualties, and one of the casualties was Alexis Hemmer, who was a 22-year-old lieutenant, and on May 2nd, he was buried in a little cemetery in this area. Now, they had to do it at night because the Germans, if they saw them trying to bury people during the daytime, they know they had casualties and various things, so they did it late at night, and Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae was the commander of the unit, and he helped with the burial. First week of May, this was bothering him, and he sat down and he started writing a little poem and just kind of wrote it out, gave a copy to one of his orderlies, and at some point that person sent it back to England, where it was published in Punch magazine. It was picked up by other magazines around the world, and in New York City, the Ladies' Home Journal published it. And a lady by the name of Mona Michael was working as a YMCA worker in the head office in New York, and a lot of the soldiers and sailors and stuff that were going overseas would come there for recreation, just to relax before they shipped out or when they're coming back. And she saw that, read that article, and she happened to be walking down the street a little while later and saw a person selling little paper poppies. So she bought all of them he had, brought them back and handed them out to the soldiers. Well, they started asking for more and more of them, and so she started making more. Some of the other soldiers that were there would help her, and basically that's how the poppy got started. And then after the war, she petitioned the veterans organizations, American Legion, which was brand new at that point, but the VFW, and they started using it as a fundraiser by having disabled soldiers and sailors make the poppies. And to this day, you know, they're still available and still out there. And so that's the story of the poppies. And I think the poem that John McCrae wrote is a very powerful poem. It reflects a lot of the thing about World War I. This was written the first week of May of 1915. In Flanders fields the poppies grow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
I just got through work and had my supper. I have been working all day. It sure keeps us busy, as we have to bake 10,000 pounds a day. We have about 30,000 men in camp, and out of that 30,000, we have 13,000 cases of the flu, but not very many deaths. I am all right, as yet, but one can never tell how far along we will remain that way. But I have been lucky so far.
But the report coming back each day is encouraging, and victory is sure. In fact, we say it's heaven, hell, or Hoboken by Christmas. Censorship forbids us telling where we are or giving any war news.
Say that again.
My great niece, she's going to be a freshman next year.
Is that what
Maureen Blakely, Morgan Muter Martin. That is a mouthful. It's a big name. I lived a big life. I was born and reared here in Peru, Indiana, and people knew me as Daisy Blakely. Later, I was best known as Maureen Morgan. Born in 1876, I was the eldest of 4 siblings. My father, Richard H. Blakely, worked as a carpenter. But his passion, the thing he was best known for, was as a band leader throughout all Miami County and beyond. So naturally, I was surrounded with music from the time I could hear. I grew up attending all of the concerts and band performances my father was leading, and as soon as my fingers could reach the frets, I was learning to play the violin. My father made the violins, by the way. I worked as a secretary with the Peru Chamber of Commerce, and that is where I learned of the great need for workers serving the troops in the U.S. Army canteens. I filled out my women's registration card, just like the one up there. And we did that before leaving for New York, then on to France with the YMCA group who entertained the troops by night and did war work during the day. As I look over the faces of the boys where I play, I cannot help thinking, how long will it be for you? How many will come back? And how many will come back whole? I took a lot of pictures, and I told my brother to save my postcards because I wanted to scrapbook when I came home. Although armistice was declared on November 11th, 1918, I was still at base hospital 21 months later. I underwent an operation prior to leaving Europe. Sometimes our rotations took us close to the front, and I sustained injuries. After returning to the States, I spent time in General Hospital 28 until discharge. In May of 1920, I received an honorable discharge and returned home to Peru. Then in October, I received a victory medal from the British government. It was a token reward for my war service to the soldiers while stationed in France. In February of 1921, I was admitted to the hospital here in Peru to have surgery related to the injuries that I received while in France. March 1st, 1921, at age 42, I passed away from complications of my surgery. My cause of death was listed as cancer of the left lung with general metastasis, indicating mustard gas may well have contributed to my injuries. It is quite a wonder that this simple Miami County gal, who was called to serve in a unique time in history, with a passionate heart, in difficult circumstances, was molded into a World War I hero.